You wake up in complete darkness, not the darkness of a bedroom with a streetlight leaking through the curtains, not the darkness of a power cut where your phone is still glowing at 3% battery. This is real darkness. No lamps, no flashlight, no glowing numbers on a clock, just cold air, the sound of wind moving through grass, and something breathing beyond the edge of the fire. You reach toward the flames. The light touches your hands, then disappears a few meters away. Beyond that circle of orange is an entire world you cannot see. Something could be watching, something could be moving. And if the fire dies before morning, you may not get another chance to light it. For most of human history, night was not a time when people simply turned off the lights and went to bed. Night was a different planet, a place ruled by cold, predators, darkness, and imagination. So how did ancient humans survive it? The answer is not that they became fearless. They didn't. They learned how to make fear useful. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how and why the one thing standing between them and death wasn't a weapon at all. When we say ancient humans survived the night without lights, we need to be clear about what without lights means. They did have light. They had fire. They had burning branches, glowing embers, oil lamps, resin, torches, and eventually candles. But they did not have the kind of light we take for granted. No room glowing at the touch of a switch. No street lights showing you the road home. No phone screen illuminating the face of the person sitting next to you. Ancient light was expensive. It needed fuel. It needed attention. It could burn out. It could be blown away by the wind. And it only pushed the darkness back a short distance. A campfire did not erase the night. It created a small island inside it. That island was enough to cook, work, talk, repair tools, protect children, and keep watch. But step beyond the firelight, and the darkness returned immediately. This is the first thing modern people forget. Ancient humans did not conquer the night. They negotiated with it, and like any negotiation, it started with one very old, very stubborn problem: keeping the fire alive in the first place. The oldest part of the story begins with fire. Humans did not invent fire. Lightning, volcanoes, and natural wildfires had been burning across Earth for hundreds of millions of years before us. But at some point, ancient humans learned to approach it, preserve it, transport it, and eventually create it. That changed everything. One of the most important sites is Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. Archaeologists found evidence suggesting that humans were using fire inside the cave roughly 1 million years ago. The evidence includes burned bones, ash, and pieces of stone that appear to have been heated in controlled fires. That does not mean an ancient person sat inside the cave with a matchbox and announced, "Excellent, I have solved nighttime." But it does show something extraordinary. Humans were no longer merely fleeing fire. They were bringing it home. At Gesher Beno Yaakov, in what is now Israel, archaeologists found burned flint and other evidence of controlled fire dating to roughly 790,000 years ago. The material was not simply scattered randomly across a landscape. It appeared in repeated concentrations, suggesting that fire was being used in particular places for particular purposes: cooking, warmth, protection, social life, maybe all of them at once. At Gesem Cave, also in Israel, people were using a central hearth hundreds of thousands of years ago. The hearth was not placed at the edge of the cave. It sat in a central location, surrounded by evidence of repeated activity. People cut meat there. They worked stone there. They gathered there. The fire was not just a tool. It was the center of the household. The center of the night. But a fire in the middle of a cave raises an obvious question. How much protection was it actually buying them? How much protection could a fire really provide? A lot, but not as much as movies suggest. Fire can frighten some animals. It can make a campsite more visible. It can give humans an early warning when branches snap or eyes appear beyond the glow. But fire does not create an invisible wall. Some predators avoid it. Others may be curious. Some may learn that a fire means food is nearby. A hungry lion is not necessarily impressed by your carefully arranged burning sticks. So ancient humans needed more than flames. They needed location. Before night arrived, the group had to choose where to sleep. A cave, rock shelter, dense woodland, high ground, or a place near water could make a major difference. The best sleeping place was not always the warmest. It was the place that offered protection from wind, flooding, falling rocks, insects, and predators. A narrow shelter could be safer than an open plain. A high ledge could make approach more difficult. A campsite with only 1 or 2 entrances was easier to watch, and a fire position near the entrance could turn darkness into a kind of alarm system. Not perfect, but better than nothing. This was survival by arrangement. The difference between waking up alive and waking up as someone else's meal might have been a few meters of rock and a fire that was fed at the right time. Geometry saved as many lives as fire did, but geometry alone couldn't watch the darkness all night. For that, they needed something fire could never be. Ancient humans also had something modern people rarely experience: a group. We tend to imagine the prehistoric individual: one hunter, one spear, one dramatic sunset. But solitary survival is usually a terrible strategy. At night, a group could share warmth. Several bodies can serve heat better than one. Several pairs of ears can detect movement. Several people can protect infants. Several minds can decide whether a sound is wind, animal, or something worth waking everyone for. There may have been some form of night watch in human groups, but we should be careful here. We do not have a written schedule from the Ice Age saying, first watch Toma, second watch Nari, do not forget the fire. The evidence is indirect. Ethnographic studies of mobile and traditional communities show that people often sleep in flexible patterns, with children, adults, and older members waking at different times. A group does not need one person standing guard all night to gain protection. If people naturally wake at different moments, someone is often alert enough to notice changes in the environment. The elderly may have slept lightly. Parents may have woken when infants moved. Hunters may have rested after returning from late activity. The group itself became a security system. Not a perfect one, but a living network of ears, eyes, memory, and reaction. Modern humans outsource safety to locks, alarms, cameras, and emergency services. Ancient humans outsourced it to one another. A body could be replaced by another body, but a warm body needed something else to actually make it through the cold. And that came from a much stranger kind of technology. And then there was clothing. It is difficult to think of clothing as nighttime technology, but in a world without heating, it was life support. Animal skins, woven fibers, grass, fur, and plant materials could preserve body heat. The ability to control fire made cold nights survivable. But fire alone was not enough. You cannot sleep comfortably beside a flame if freezing wind is passing through your shelter. Ancient people needed insulation. They needed bedding. They needed dry materials beneath the body, because the ground absorbs heat rapidly. At archaeological sites, researchers have found evidence of ancient bedding made from grass and other plant material. One famous example comes from Border Cave in South Africa, where researchers found evidence suggesting that people used plant bedding tens of thousands of years ago. At the Sibudu Cave site, also in South Africa, people used layers of plant material for bedding around 77,000 years ago. Some of these plants may even have had insect-repelling properties. Think about that. Before mattresses, before blankets from a store, before anyone could complain about memory foam being too soft, people were gathering grasses, leaves, bark, and other materials to build a sleeping surface that kept them warmer and less exposed to insects. The prehistoric bed was not luxurious, but it was engineered. It turned a cold patch of ground into something close to a home. They had built warmth. They had built a lookout system. What they couldn't build was a guarantee, because some things in the dark were simply faster, stronger, and hungrier than they were. Still, the night was dangerous. Ancient humans lived alongside predators that no longer exist in most parts of the world. Cave lions, large hyenas, wolves, leopards, giant eagles. In some regions, bears and other animals could enter shelters or approach camps. Humans had weak night vision compared with many predators. Our eyes evolved primarily for daylight. We can see reasonably well in low light, but we are not owls. We do not detect movement in darkness with the precision of a cat. So how did our ancestors compensate? Through hearing, through smell, through memory, through fire, and through rules. Do not wander away from camp after dark. Do not leave food scraps near the sleeping area. Do not sleep at the most exposed part of the shelter. Do not allow the fire to collapse into cold ash. Do not investigate every sound alone. These may not have been written rules. They were probably learned through experience, and experience in the prehistoric world could be a very harsh teacher. A person who ignored the signs of a nearby predator might not be around to pass the lesson on. The people who survived were the people who remembered. The rules kept people alive when the night was working against them. But not every night was an enemy. Some nights the darkness quietly handed them an advantage instead. Not every night was spent hiding. Ancient humans may have used the darkness as an opportunity. The full moon created a natural increase in visibility. Open landscapes became easier to cross. Animals could be tracked. Hunting might continue after sunset in certain environments. People could travel along familiar routes. They could gather shellfish during low tide. They could maintain fires, prepare food, process plants, repair clothing, and make tools. The moon was not just a source of light. It was a calendar and a timing system. A bright moon changed the risk of moving through the landscape. A dark moon offered concealment. Different animals behaved differently under different lunar conditions. The same was true of humans. Some nights were for movement, some were for caution, some were for staying close to the fire. The sky gave ancient people information, but only if they knew how to read it. The moon's shape, the direction of its movement, the position of bright stars, the seasonal appearance of constellations. For people without clocks or maps, the night sky was not empty. It was a navigation system, a calendar, a warning, and sometimes a story. The sky told them when to move, but the fire is what taught them how to think. Because once the group stopped moving for the night, something happened that no predator, no moonlight, and no shelter could give them. Which brings us to one of the most important things ancient humans probably did at night. They talked. We cannot recover ancient conversations. Words disappear almost instantly unless they are written down. But humans are intensely social animals, and the fire creates the perfect environment for communication. During the day, attention is divided. You are walking, hunting, collecting, carrying, building, watching children, reading the landscape. At night, activity contracts toward the fire hands. Still work. Samanon shapes stone. Samanon cleans a hide. Samanon prepares food, but the pace slows. The group has time. This is where information can move. A person who knows where water can be found teaches someone younger. A hunter explains the tracks of an animal. An older member remembers a dangerous valley. Someone tells the story of a storm, a migration, a conflict, or a successful hunt. Storytelling was not just entertainment, it was memory storage. A story could encode where not to travel when a river floods, which plants are poisonous, and how a group once survived a difficult season. Before books, maps, schools, and search engines, the human voice carried the database. A grandparent sitting beside a fire could contain more survival information than an entire modern shelf. And the young had to listen. There was no pause button, no transcript, no, I'll just look it up later. If you forgot the story, the landscape might remind you why it mattered. The fire didn't just keep the group warm, it kept the group's memory alive, and that memory may have quietly rewired what it meant to be human. Night may also have strengthened human bonding. We do not know exactly how ancient families slept or arranged themselves, but close physical contact would have mattered. Infants needed warmth and protection. Adults needed shared heat. People who trusted one another could rest more easily. People who felt safe together could survive the night better than people living alone. This may sound obvious, but it could have influenced the evolution of human social life. Humans are unusual animals. We cooperate across large groups. We share food. We care for children who are not always our own. We remember the dead. We tell stories about people who lived before us. Some of those behaviors may have been strengthened by long evenings spent together. The fire created a place where faces could be seen, voices could be heard, expressions could be read. The darkness beyond the camp became a shared threat. Inside the circle of light, the group became something stronger than a collection of individuals. It became a community. The night was frightening. But it may also have been where human culture grew, and that same fire, the one holding the group together, was quietly reshaping something else too. The human body itself. There is a theory that fire changed the human brain by making cooking possible. Cooked food is easier to digest. It can provide more usable energy. That extra energy may have supported the evolution of our unusually large brains. The details are debated, and no single discovery explains the entire human story. But fire unquestionably changed our relationship with time. A human being could remain active after sunset. Before fire, darkness forced activity to stop more completely. After fire, night became an extension of the day. Not a bright extension, a dim, smoky, dangerous one, but an extension. This changed the rhythm of life. Humans could process food after dark, they could make tools, they could care for injured members, they could teach, they could plan, they could wait out storms, they could make decisions when the rest of the landscape had disappeared. In a way, fire gave humans a second world. The daylight world belonged to movement and visibility. The firelit world belonged to memory, planning, and imagination. Fire wasn't an event. It was infrastructure, and like all infrastructure, it demanded upkeep, a price someone in the group had to keep paying every single night. But fire had a cost. It demanded fuel. Someone had to collect wood. Someone had to protect the embers from wind and rain. Someone had to move the fire when the group moved. Starting a fire was difficult before modern materials. Even with friction drills, hand drills, fire plows, or flint and pyrite, creating a flame required dry fuel, skill, patience, and luck. The easiest way to make fire was often not to create it. It was to keep it alive. A glowing ember could be wrapped in bark, carried in ash, or transported inside a container of organic material. The fire was treated almost like a living member of the group. Feed it, and it gave warmth. Neglect it, and it died. A dying fire was not merely inconvenient. It could mean cold, darkness, spoiled food, and vulnerability. That is why ancient campsites often contain repeated evidence of hearths. The group returned to the same locations. The same caves were used again and again. The same central areas became associated with warmth, cooking, and social life. A hearth was a kind of prehistoric technology hub, not because it had screens, because everything important happened around it. So if fire was this demanding, this fragile, this exhausting to maintain, did ancient humans even get real sleep? The answer is stranger than you'd expect. Now, did ancient humans sleep in one uninterrupted 8-hour block? We cannot say with certainty. The popular idea that pre-industrial people regularly slept in two neat chunks, a first sleep and a second sleep, is based largely on historical references from more recent societies, not direct evidence from the Stone Age. Sleep patterns probably varied with season, latitude, culture, age, childcare, temperature, and danger. Some people may have slept in long stretches. Others may have woken naturally in the middle of the night. A fire could be tended during these waking periods. People might talk quietly, care for children, feed themselves, or simply remain awake until sleep returned. But ancient humans probably did not spend every night in dramatic conversation beside a roaring blaze. Sometimes they slept, sometimes they worked, sometimes they watched, sometimes they were sick, afraid, grieving, or hungry. The night was not a single experience. It depended on who you were. A child, a pregnant woman, an injured hunter, an elder, a person responsible for the fire, a person who had seen a predator near the camp the previous evening. There was no universal prehistoric nighttime routine. There were only different ways of managing the same problem. How do you make it safely to morning? And safely was never guaranteed. Because for all the fire, the shelter, and the shared warmth, one wrong night could still undo everything. And morning was not guaranteed. This is the part modern documentaries often soften. For ancient humans, darkness was not simply beautiful and mysterious. It was a serious survival challenge. A fire could go out, a child could wander, a storm could flood a shelter, a predator could approach silently, a person could fall, become injured, or become separated from the group. The night amplified every weakness. If you were alone, cold, and lost, the darkness was not an aesthetic experience. It was a countdown, but humans survived because they were good at reducing uncertainty. They selected safer locations. They remembered animal behavior, they used tools, they built fires, they created clothing and bedding, they lived socially, they watched the sky. They passed knowledge from one generation to the next. No single invention defeated the night. Survival came from stacking small advantages. A better shelter, a warmer hide, a brighter fire, a sharper spear, a more alert companion. A remembered story together. These advantages turned darkness from an impossible threat into a manageable part of life. There is one more thing ancient humans had that almost no one alive today has ever truly experienced, and it changes how we should think about their fear. There is also something ancient humans had that we have largely lost: a relationship with true darkness. Today, even when the sun goes down, most people remain surrounded by artificial light. Buildings glow, roads glow, screens glow, the horizon over cities is permanently bright. Many children grow up without ever seeing the Milky Way clearly. We know what darkness is in theory, but we rarely experience it as a complete environmental condition. Ancient humans did. They knew exactly how far firelight reached. They knew which sounds belonged to the wind. They knew how shadows changed under moonlight. They knew the difference between a normal silence and the silence that meant animals were nearby. Their senses were not magically superior. Their eyes were not adapted to see through blackness. But their attention was. They had to notice small changes because small changes mattered: a strange smell, A missing sound, a shift in the fire, a movement at the edge of vision. The darkness trained awareness. And it trained imagination too. When you cannot see what is beyond the fire, your brain fills in the missing world. A bush becomes an animal. A crack becomes a footstep. A distant howl becomes a warning. Fear was not always accurate, but it was useful enough to keep people cautious. The ancient human brain did not ask, "Is this objectively dangerous?" It asked, "Could it be?" And in the darkness, "could be" was often enough to stay awake. Fear kept them alive down here on the ground, but look up, and that same darkness was offering them something else entirely. Still, there was beauty in that darkness. Once the fire settled and the danger became familiar, the sky opened. Ancient humans saw stars with a clarity most of us never experience. They saw the Milky Way as a river of light. They watched meteors cross the sky. They tracked the moon's phases. They recognized the seasonal movement of constellations. The night was not empty. It was crowded with information. The sky told them when seasons were changing. It helped travelers maintain direction. It gave meaning to births, deaths, migrations, and rituals. The same stars that guided ancient hunters later guided sailors, farmers, astronomers, and explorers. Long before humans built observatories, they were observing. Long before calendars were printed, the sky was being counted. Long before anyone understood galaxies, people were lying beside fires and asking what those lights were. We often imagine ancient humans as trapped in darkness, but perhaps that is the wrong image. They were not trapped under a blank sky. They lived beneath a sky more visible than ours. They had less artificial light, but they had more stars. Everything we've covered, the fire, the shelter, the watch, the stars, was really one answer to a single question. So let's put it back together. So how did ancient humans survive the night without lights? They used the lights they could control: fire, moonlight, stars. They chose shelters carefully. They stayed close to one another. They protected children. They preserved warmth. They listened. They remembered. And they learned when to move and when to wait. They did not eliminate darkness. They built a small circle of safety inside it. That circle was fragile. It could be extinguished by rain, wind, or neglect. But inside it, humans did something remarkable. They made plans. They shared knowledge. They told stories. They raised children. They imagined the future. The first classrooms may not have had walls. They may have had smoke, stained ceilings, and a fire in the center. The first maps may not have been drawn. They may have been spoken. The first history books may not have been written. They may have been remembered by people sitting in the dark. And that is the strange truth about ancient nights. The darkness did not only make humans afraid, it may have helped make us human. Because when the world disappeared beyond the firelight, people had fewer distractions. They had one another. A face illuminated by flame. A voice describing the path ahead. A hand passing food. A child falling asleep against someone's side. A story turning danger into memory. A group waiting together for the Sunday. We think civilization began with cities, writing, agriculture, or monuments. But long before all of those, there were humans gathered around fires, using a few meters of light to create a world. And when you turn off your phone tonight, when the room becomes quiet and your eyes slowly adjust to the darkness, remember what that darkness once meant. It was where our ancestors listened for predators. It was where they protected embers. It was where they watched the stars. It was where they taught children how to survive. And somewhere, thousands of generations ago, a person sat beside a small fire, looked into the blackness beyond it, and waited for morning. Just as humans have done since the beginning.